Thank you for listening to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. A Glimpse of the Kingdom can remain free because of generous donors like you. If you'd like to donate, feel free to do so online, or you can send payments through Facebook Messenger. Don't forget to tell your friends about it so that they can enjoy this ministry as well. Be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any podcasts.
You can listen to my daddy every single day, like in the gym, in the car, or just at home. Glimpse of the Kingdom is awesome!
Also, I'm still a good bit sick. Glad you're here. All right, we're going to get started. And first, I'll introduce, if you don't know already, Brock Caffey, the right Reverend Bishop. I'm just kidding, that's what you do. Brock and his family, of course, have been coming here to First Christian for a while, and we're so fortunate to have Brock, because he's a licensed therapist, and he's going to, as I've said before, is offering his services for free here at the church. So on Wednesdays, at least for the time being, for a while, on Wednesdays, if you stop by whenever, Brock will see you for free. And it's legit. This isn't like it's all private, confidential. Brock has business cards. He also has a private practice right around the corner. You can walk here from here, go there from here. And throughout this study, which I already planned, I asked Brock if he'd be willing to help supplement the material from time to time. And he said absolutely, he'd be willing to. So what we're going to do is, he has a microphone as well. And what we're going to do is, in grief and forgiveness, I have different sections of what, why, and how. And after each section, I'll just pause, and then Brock will chime in supplemental stuff as well. And that's why he has a microphone, so we can hear it in the Facebook. And then anytime there's Q&A, we might just take turns on that. So Brock has been doing the grief counseling for many, many years. So I'm excited he's here and looking forward to him as a resource for sure. Why is grief and forgiveness put together? I mentioned some of this back last fall, but just to remind you, in my line of work, we deal a lot with grief and forgiveness in the ministry, and I've done counseling for individual and couples about 15, almost 20 years, in different levels of intensity. What I mean is frequency. And two of the most common themes that come up all the time is some kind of grieving aspect, and forgiveness is often there. That's one reason why I put these together, because it's so common. The second thing is, in common culture and in church culture, these two concepts are genuinely misunderstood. There's a lot of pop psychology around these things. When someone dies, just plant a flower and move on, or forgive and forget, smile and bear it. There's a lot of grin and bear it. There's a lot of things like that are out there that I've heard for years and years. That's the other reason why I do these together. The third reason why I do these together is because there are similar features. These aren't clean, nice categories between grief and there's forgiveness, separate. Very often these overlap. They're not the same, but there's a lot of bleed over. So sometimes you're going to hear grieving vocabulary, certainly in the grief section, even in forgiveness, and that's on purpose. And hopefully it won't bother you too much to hear some bleed over, because they're so similar. In forgiveness, usually some degree of grieving. And to grieve properly, sometimes a degree of forgiveness. And so that's why I put these in together. So grieving and forgiveness are separate enough to have different titles, but I put them together because you'll see they blend together. Because of the nature of this topic, as I've taught it through the years, sometimes it can really touch on some really heavy things that people haven't resolved, wounds they have, and so forth. That's okay. That's okay if it does that. And you might not feel the freedom you want to feel to weep and cry and whatever. Okay, but I'll encourage you as much as possible to see this as a safe spot. Having said that, don't share things you think would profoundly embarrass you or someone else. And I've never told anybody that Bob raped me, and his name is, here's his address. I mean, I wouldn't go there because we're going to help put this on Facebook. At the same time, the only people who can watch this are people who have liked First Christian Church. So this is somewhat private, and if you're not in the microphone, basically Facebook can't hear you. So that's another thing to remember too that'll help you. But I want you to feel safety, but understand don't put yourself too crazy out there. But it's okay. This is okay to cry. It's okay to be upset. It's just okay. It's safe. So there's no reason ever, and hear me say this, you don't ever need to apologize for that. Anytime ever, by the way, ever. But certainly not in this study. You never have to go, I'm so sorry I'm crying, or I got to catch my breath. Okay, well, take your time. So this is one of those kind of topics, and that's okay. I might cry too. I might bring up stuff in my own past, and it's grief therapy for me. And if I ever say we've got to move on, or that's good to talk about Brock later or myself later, it's not because I don't care. It's because there's another venue where you really can get to touch on those things. Does that make sense? Because believe me, I care. I really do. I've come around the basics of that very quickly. This is primarily the chief handout we'll be using over the next few weeks. If Brock's, he has some other things that he'll be handing out from time to time as supplemental material, and we'll do that as time goes on. I think I've covered all the bases. Whatever, talk to me. And you need to use the microphone if you don't mind. You can take it off if you want.
That's it so far.
That's it.
I think, is that all right? If it gets awkward, I may have to shuffle around, but that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're covering it.
Okay. Now, you need to know that there are enormous amount of literature written on this topic. I mean, my goodness. I mean, I can hear testify, the books, the workbooks, the journals, the academic journals, the work, I mean, on and on it goes. And you can consult numerous, and there's all kinds of ways to define it, and I should have said this too, on all these things. This is, I think, mainstream ways to understand grief and forgiveness as best as I understand it in my studies and experience. And I ran this by Brock as well, and he said the same thing. Having said that, you can study books that have a little different definitions here and there, and that's great and fine. But I'm going to go with what's on the paper because that's what I think is most compelling. So grief is our response to loss, even if you had multiple other definitions. I'll let that pause for a second. And that happens anytime something happens you didn't want to happen. Think about that. It can be the loss of a thing. When my kids come in, I lost my little froggy, or I lost my flower. Well, that's grief. They lost something they really cherished. And so horrible parents go, get over it, go pick another one. What's the big deal? That's horrible parenting, little footnote. What you say is, I'm sorry you lost it. It's sad you lost it. It can be things like that, or I lost my Bible one time on accident, and that was very sad to me. There's things that have sentimental nature to it. Sometimes we lose relationships. We lose people that we love, whether it be through abandonment, through divorce, through death. Sometimes we lose abstract things, like we lose the dream of a healthy marriage. We lose the dream of being married. We lose the dream I had of the job where I could pay my bills fine. We lose the dream of graduating. So there's all kinds of more abstract things, expectations we had that we lost. You might say, I dreamed of having children that didn't give me problems. I mean, parents go, there's all kinds of things. We were chatting earlier, I mean, like Brock said earlier to me privately, if I stubbed my toe, I was thinking, the loss of the expectation of my toe not to be hurting. I thought, but then there's disappointment. And then later on he's going to talk more about it, and I want you to, about attachment. But that's a sense, some kind of loss. Now hear me here, since an emotional response, it's not that you have to think it's a loss. Emotions don't work that way. They don't work that way. If I do stub my toe, I don't think, I just stubbed my toe. That hurts me. Right, we all know that's not how it worked. There's an emotional response instantly. You don't have to think it's a loss. But grief is what we do when there has been something happening we didn't want to happen. And usually it means we lost something. And so the grieving or mourning is the process. Various features is the process of working through the pain and the sadness to get to a place of acceptance. Some people use the word closure. I like that word on certain kinds of grief. When it comes, oftentimes the word closure sounds insensitive to people who have lost people, spouses and children and grandchildren, whatever. The closure sounds like a bow on it, and you never have to revisit or something. So I didn't use that word at all in the handout, acceptance. And I'll talk a lot about what these words mean in the whole study. But that's what grieving is. Grief language speaks of pain, loss, other negative emotions. I call them negative emotions. Notice I didn't say sinful emotions. I'm going to talk about that constantly. Emotions aren't sinful. They can be negative or positive. That is, they sound like anger and sadness and whatever. We know what the negative emotions are, right? Positive emotions, happy, joy. Negative ones, I like how June Hunt says, these are some examples. Whatever you say or think or hear someone say, I am grieving over. Or I really miss blank. I am so embarrassed when. I was so embarrassed when. I felt abandoned by. I was really hurt when. I've been determined never to allow X to happen again. These are things you say that express some kind of negative emotion or pain or loss. Now, oftentimes, in my experience, and Brock, I'll pause and let Brock chime in my experience in counseling, very often it's the case that a person doesn't know why they're so sad. They're not able to articulate what it is they feel. They just feel uneasy or restless, or they can't sleep. They can give you some symptoms. I'll say, "We brought you here today. I'm not sleeping well. Why is that?" They don't know they're depressed until, after 15, 20 minutes, it can get easier to spot, depending on certain questions you ask. So oftentimes, I put this here because the grief language, because I'm trying to, as usual, equip you. When you find yourself saying these kinds of things or thinking these kinds of things, you're experiencing some kind of grief. So a lot of times that can be your ding, 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 your red flag. That's something, I'm sad about something. Some people have no problem expressing sadness. Others they're just almost immune to the concept. They haven't been trained, they have shame about it, all kinds of, we'll talk about that later. But I'm trying to get you to think about ways to talk about or the things you might thought about when it comes to grief. Secondly, it helps you help other people, the friends or loved ones you have who they use these vocabulary words. That's the ding, ding, ding. They're grieving about something. And later on, I'm going to give you tips to help people who are grieving. Does that make sense so far? That's what grieving is, and there's some telltale signs. I'm going to pause for a second. Brock, anything, brother? Anything you want to add? Subtract?
No, I think it's really important, and you already brought it up, but to think of grief in other words because, grief's pretty difficult for a lot of us to think about, and most of the time I don't think we really want to think about it. So if you think of it in other words, what other words would you give it? I've seen it come out as anger, confusion, all those different words. But when we talked about it in my graduate school, we talked about disappointment was actually a pretty common word that came up. And maybe that's another way of reframing it to, use the stub your toe analogy is probably the safest one, which is why I start to talk about it cognitively with stubbing your toe. And then you can start to think of other situations that might be related to stubbing your toe or the sort of emotional experience you might have with that. If you can figure that out, you can start to build that laundry list that might be related to grief, to disappointment, to some people use the word being upset. Some people express anger, but they don't realize what's behind it. So that's pretty important, and the recognition of it is really key to getting, if you're ever going to get to the point of helping yourself or someone else with grief. That's what I got to say about that part, I think.
That's great. So any level of disappointment is a kind of grief.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah, any kind of disappointment.
Yeah. And I struggled to, I think I can probably elaborate on that a little bit. Everyone's familiar with having a fantasy or a dream or an idea. It's really super abstract, but that's where I think understanding that disappointment is the most important part of it, that we can actually grieve something that doesn't even exist except for in our own mind. And that can be attached to things, but in that we're thinking beings. I think that it's okay to allow yourself to think of it in those terms, that it's not just the things that happen to you physically or just in terms of time frame and relationships. You can actually have a relationship with something in your mind that hasn't even happened yet, but you were looking forward to it. So this gets really big really fast. So that I don't want to confuse the issue anymore.
No, that's
by
good.
saying, here's all the stuff that we grieve.
Like the abstract. And just to piggyback that real quickly, then y'all can join it. I think that often with my own children. Let's say they expected to go to that, water park, and they couldn't go. If they've been looking forward to it, the sadness and the rage or whatever that comes out just because they were expecting it. And I thought that many times in my own life. And what I've found adults are a lot better at doing is when it's abstract things, we typically go to the ways to shut down the disappointment. Like, you should get over it. It's not that big a deal. It must have been God's plan in the first place, and we just instantaneously shut down the grieving stage because we should know better. There's some parental message or messages that we just, bleh. But children don't have that. They just freely express a disappointment. If they wanted that little piece of candy at the dentist's office that wasn't there, my son used to get upset when a sticker he wanted at the doctor's office wasn't there. Now, he didn't go home and weep about it, but he was sad, and he would say it. He might even tear up. Now, as an adult, I don't do, well, sometimes I tear up over stickers, but not, no, I'm just kidding. But I don't. But he sure does, and it reminds me, kids always remind me of how they're not forced to think you shouldn't do that, and there's a health to that. But anyway, so what are some things you've had relationships with in your mind with a thing or a thought or a dream that has been very disappointing to you? Gotcha. So for you, just to repeat it, for you the grieving is only grieving over a person you've lost, not over stuff, not when you got divorced, not when you got robbed or whatever. And technically speaking, nearly any specialist will tell you grieving is and was inside of you a part of all those things you mentioned. Whether you tapped into it, whether you expressed it or whatever. And anger itself is part of the grieving process. But I appreciate what you were saying because I want to make sure we're all on the same page. And I appreciate, because a lot of people do only expect grieving to be about the loss of a loved one. It's usually only used in that setting, which is one of the reasons why I'm teaching this class. And so we make sure it's used, because anytime there's disappointment, loss, there is some grief there. And don't think, and if there's another thing, just in case, it's hard to pay all the stuff you might be thinking if you don't ask. Don't think grief equals weeping. Those are not synonymous. Weeping can be part of grief. Does that make sense? Don't think grief equals, I just go, well, I didn't grieve over that. You might mean, well, I didn't go home and bawl my eyes out. Well, that doesn't mean you have to do that. There's still a sense of sadness and loss that comes with it. Thank you, Pat, for sharing that. Anybody else? You got a long list. My goodness, I'm so sorry to hear that. That's terrible loss. I hope and pray that the study we do can help some of that, and I hope and pray that out of the study you're able to get some more healing through the process. I really do. Thank you for having the courage to open up about that, Linda. Thank you so much. I do want to piggyback. Well, I will say real quickly while I'm thinking about it. Just to piggyback one important thing of what Linda just said is the mixed feelings when it comes in grief. Very often it's the case people don't feel permission to feel both, any mixture of emotions. And so and this is very common when someone has cancer or dementia or some disease that they slowly fade, and they feel terrible to feel happy, or they go back and forth. Now, people ask, can I feel happy that they're not? I feel awful though. I didn't want them to die. I know you don't. So the grief involves all this together. It involves all these mixture of emotions, and that's okay. I'll talk a lot more about that later, but I'm just so glad to pick it, because I'm so glad she said I felt both, and that's good, because you want to feel whatever you feel. That's the what. Anything up before we move on? Go ahead.
No, just one little comment and part there. And I heard it earlier too, and I forgot your name.
Pat.
Pat, I'm sorry for that. But it has a lot to do with the things that we label. You know, what names do we give the feelings? Some of us have a bigger vocabulary than others. When it comes to emotions, some of us are more aware or less aware of our emotions. Some of us give ourselves permission to express, not to experience, but to express different feelings. So we're all different in that way. But the one way that most of us are similar, as long as we're not psychopaths, I don't think we have any of those in this room. Well, let's hope not. But anyway, that most of us are similar in that we all feel the same feelings, or we experience the same experiences emotion-wise. We just don't have the same. Subjectively, it's not the same for us. We don't call it the same.
About that, though,
Yeah.
because with each death, depending on the relationship, there's a different level of grieving.
Absolutely.
I had a whole lot of them. But when my second husband passed away, I went into this deep, dark, ugly depression. I was there for 3 years. How in the world my coworkers put up with me, I don't know. Because I was a mean, ugly person. Although I didn't see it. Because the doctor had me doped up on so many drugs, depression, and this and that, and sleeping pills. And finally one day, I don't know, something just went off in my head, a light bulb. And I'm like, I gotta get rid of these pills. I gotta quit taking these. And so I got rid of the pills, quit taking them, and I slowly came back to the world, and I looked back and I saw, oh my God, you're this ugly person. And that's just where I'm talking to my coworkers, and I said, how did you guys tolerate me? Because we knew you Pat, and we liked you, and we knew you was going through an ugly time. But for 3 years, they still loved me. It was awful. And I look back on that time and I'm like, I wouldn't have tolerated me.
And outside of this room, Brock will have a whole lot to agree with you on that drugging you up part. He gets worked up about that too. Just to piggyback, so to hear it, Pat was saying that there's different levels of grief depending on the nature of the loss and the disappointment.
And you're the person and how close you are to them.
And that when it comes to people, that's exactly right. Different levels of grief, and that includes not only people, but expectations and disappointments in general.
Right.
My disappointment on the way here that I didn't get here early when I wanted to. That was my plan, and stop by Starbucks to get a hot tea because my throat's killing me right now. I'm disappointed. That's very different from my parents divorcing, and so the emotional trauma is going to be very different. And it's very appropriate to give yourself permission to feel different levels of grieving process. And you were saying that one of them, the depression hit real hard for 3 years. The other one's not so much. And that's also a normal.
It hit like
Absolutely.
a tornado, it really did.
Well, I'm glad you're able to label that. Can I move on? Nothing else, Brock?
Yeah, go ahead.
On the why. So the what is, that's a grief. Grieving, one more time, is our emotional response to loss or disappointment. Why do we grieve? I say grieving is God's gift to us. Now, what I mean by that, please remember, grieving is not the loss. It's our emotional response to it. Grieving is a gift. It is our ability to process loss while we're living as disciples of Jesus in this world. One thing that people can often find themselves doing is getting trapped in this mindset or attitude that the goal, once I've been hurt, is never be hurt again. And we become avoidant, conflict avoidant, and people avoidant. Of course, we can develop social phobia. And that's not what Christians are supposed to do. That's not fussing at the grieving process, but that disposition or attitude, I'm never going to do X. I'll never have that friend. I'll never ever talk to another man the rest of my life because he hurt me, or I'll never talk to a woman. That's not appropriate. And Jesus has made us, if we're Christians, to live as disciples in the world. To save time, can I have three of y'all pick three different verses? Someone do Mark 14:34, someone do Luke 19:41, and some John 11:35. You just scream out which one you're going to read for me.
First one.
Okay, so you'll do Mark 14:34.
14:30.
You'll do Luke 19:41.
Hey, Ken.
Okay, Luke 19:41 is yours, Linda. Luke 19:41.
I've got John.
John 11:35. These are examples of grieving in the real world.
Mark 14:34.
Mm-hmm.
And said to them, I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and keep awake.
Remember who that is?
That's Jesus.
That's Jesus. Where is he at in Mark 14? That's right. So he's in Gethsemane, right before he's going to the cross, and it says he's grieved. And that's the right word. The word is like a torturous, horrible feeling. He is very, very, very scared and sad about what's about to happen. That's Mark 14:34. And that's that's Jesus talking. Luke 19:41. Luke 19:41. Go ahead. Yeah, sure. Saying,
if you had known, even you, especially in this your day, the things that make for your peace, but now they are hidden from your eyes.
That's right. So in Luke 19, who's speaking there? Anybody know? Luke 19?
Jesus again.
That's Jesus. Remember what he's doing in Luke 19? Anybody? He is weeping. Why is he weeping? Why is he so sad? And we just read it. Had you known. He's weeping over the city of Jerusalem because Jerusalem won't do what? They won't repent. They won't accept his message.
Yeah.
And he is very, very sad about that. That's exactly right. And that's why he's weeping. He's sad. And notice how he's not sad because someone died, right? In that sense, he's sad because of expectation. He's disappointed. He even says it. He's weeping over the fact he wanted the people in Jerusalem, and that's a broad word, but basically his people to accept his message, and he didn't. It makes him very sad. John 11:35, the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. That's the one Bible verse you ought to know. John 11:35, Jesus wept. In John chapter 11, what's going on, David? You remember?
Lazarus, his friend, had died temporarily, and he was grieved because he was talking with Mary and Martha.
That's That's right. John 11, he gets word that Lazarus, one of his good friends, is about to die. And the disciple says, let's go. And Jesus says, no, let's wait here for a few more days. Imagine I heard a pastor say this. Imagine what would happen to a pastor if one of the big dogs of the church is about to die. And we'll wait for 3 days. Anyway, Jesus can do that. And he shows up, and Lazarus is dead. And they show up on the way, and Mary and Martha are like, had you been here, this would not have happened. And it might be the case she's just saying that as a faith statement. Like, had you been here, it'd have been good. I don't tend to read it that way. Most interpreters read it as a frustration, though it doesn't say she was frustrated. She just says, and then Jesus, where is he? He's dead. He weeps. It's possible they wept because he misses his friend. It's also possible that he weeps because the Jews, quotation mark, because in John's gospel, there's always the Jews don't have faith in him. And so that's also makes sure. The fact is, he still weeps either way. Either he's weeping over his friend who's died, or he's weeping with the fact they still don't trust. So when she says, had you been here, this wouldn't have happened, it demonstrates she thinks Jesus can't save the problem now. So it's a lack of faith or trust in that. So scholars go back and forth.
He could have been weeping for having her being put through that too.
Exactly.
Others say she's weeping because he's weeping because she's sad. Some say that. Yeah, Pat says, I think he waited deliberately to go here. I agree. He did wait. He said, let's wait for a few more days. He wanted Lazarus to be dead. In Judaism, as far as we can tell, most Greeks and Romans, they believe that the spirit or soul of a person stayed around the body for about 3 days. And so you waited till the third day to demonstrate he's dead as a doornail, or what that expression means. So that's why he waits 3 days. And that's also probably why Jesus waited to the third day to be raised from the grave. So Jesus is in the real world, experiencing real loss. He's grieved and sad about a death that's about to happen. This is Jesus talking. This is Jesus. The Gospel's talking about Jesus. Jesus himself saying, I am so sad that Jerusalem won't do it. He's very, very, very disappointed, and it makes him sad. John 11:35, he's weeping. And we could give other examples all through the Bible of people grieving and so forth. But I picked these three, let you hear what Jesus says. Why grieve? Is God's gift for us to process that pain. Think about that. Think about if he didn't give us the capacity to process the pain. So we still felt it, but there's no way to get it out. And that's the living hell that a lot of people meet when they show up to a therapist office after 30, 40 years. But imagine if none of us had the capacity to grieve, to cry. Number two, why grieve? It's a gift, but also we need to grieve because if we don't, all kinds of negative nonsense will come out in your life. And we call this repressed grief. I don't really care if you know that vocabulary, but repressed grief is when you've not grieved enough. The words usually you hear it is it's bottled up. Oh, I stuff it. Ever use that vocabulary in your mind before? Okay, that's repressed grief. It appears in unwanted behavior. And let me go through this kind of slowly because this is what people, usually when they show up in therapist office, this is what's going on. But listen for your own life. Exhaustion. There's a difference, and listen, of course, and we all know that, don't we, as adults? There's different levels of exhaustion. There's exhaustion because I worked out on building a fence all day, and then there's a weariness that just takes over you where it's hard to focus, you feel rest. It's that kind of exhausted. If you feel that for a long time, you're headed towards either a burnout or depression. That's exhaustion's a big one. A lack of sleep. Now, lack of sleep doesn't mean you're grieving, but it can be very much one of the signs. I'm going to keep adding little footnotes. I hear oftentimes people talk about anxiety. I'm worried, I'm stressed, and I just wake up in the middle of the night. Or they'll say I'm having a hard time sleeping. And of course, it's because their stress level, anxiety is so high that their mind wants to race. Same thing with grief. Loss of appetite, it very much affects how much you want to eat.
Never had that problem.
Never had that problem?
Sometimes they're the opposite.
I knew that
You
was
can
gonna-
have an increase too.
There you go. Yeah, that's right. That's
And
right.
they can
You
have
can have
sleeping
increase
all
in
the
that.
time,
That's
too,
right.
so.
Yeah, sleeping all the time. Yeah, you can't have that. That's right. That's right. You can't have that. Depression. And of course, depression is a very focused kind of sadness that is much more akin to, and Brock, you can jump in, it's much more akin to a sense of being numb. Numb.
It's indescribable.
Yeah, it is a little bit.
I can't even describe the depression I was
You
in.
come to a sense where it's very akin to hopelessness.
Yeah.
listlessness. Depressed people often describe, and I've been depressed too, it feels oftentimes like there's a movie going on in your life and you're kind of watching
You're
it.
watching it, yes.
Yeah, you're watching that.
Yeah.
That's depression.
I have that.
And you
In
can,
a deep, dark void.
in a deep, dark void.
Mhm.
You know?
That's what it is.
Now, of course, just to keep repeating this on purpose so that, because it's on podcasts, a lot of people, they can't be asking the same questions. These symptoms are not only symptoms of grief. That is to say, all kinds of things can cause this. Biological issues, hormonal issues, all kinds of things. It's just these can be symptomatic that you're in a deep grieving stage, if that makes sense. That's all I'm
If
saying.
that's not your normal state.
Correct. If it's not your normal state, that's right. Some people just don't need much sleep at night. But if you've been recently staying in 3 or 4 days in a row, that can be a sign. Thank you for that. Guilt and anger. Guilt can be, these are similar but not the same. Nightmares. Forgetfulness. A lot of times there's repressed grief. It's like, I can't find my key. I don't know. I used to be so thoughtful. Now.
Yeah.
Inability to concentrate.
Yeah.
Behaviors that escape. That's a very common one. And that escape can be escape to something that just numbs the pain and or gets me not to think about the pain. And that could be increased eating nonsense food, junk food, drugs, alcohol, sex, shopping sprees, vacations, quitting work, anything that I got to get out, video games, sleeping for a long time on purpose, all that kind of stuff.
So it's kind of unclear, the behaviors that escape. You mean activities where you just kind of lose yourself and just let, it's escape reality mentally and just get.
Yeah, any behavior you can choose to try to escape what you were experiencing before, because that hurts or you're sad. Yeah, withdrawal from people, from a life, being moody, loss of faith or anger at God, and you could list other things. I'll pause here for a second. Brock, what do you want to?
Well, and just going off what you were saying, Susan, it's like I always bring up drugs, alcohol, that kind of stuff, compulsive quilting, anything like that.
I've been a cleanaholic sometimes.
Yeah, that's good. Cleaning. Yeah, that's a good one. Cleaning holic.
I try to do something positive.
And it can look positive, it can be positive, but it can also be a sign. This whole list parallels the diagnostic criteria for major depression, just to put that in there. It's not always, and just what David was saying, it's not always major depression. As our medication starts to scare me because it starts to look like escape behavior, sometimes we experience symptoms for a very natural reason, part of our design. When they start to look like what a doctor would call symptoms, they may very well be. I wouldn't want to be the guy saying don't do anything about it to a doctor. But at the same time, if you can attribute it to something that actually happened that you can think of, it may be something, and there may be more to it, and it might be something that you simply need to process with or without a little bit of chemical help. That's where someone who does psychiatry or psychology or therapy for a living can come in handy, or just having an understanding friend, like, well, we're going to talk about that in a little bit, that can be very helpful. A couple of other things were, there's a big word called anhedonia. Was that on the list? I didn't see it on there. Basically, it just means I used to like something and I don't really care about it anymore. So if you were an avid fisherman or loved music or name any hobby or interest you might have had, and then all of a sudden, clunk, it's just not there anymore. That can be
Sometimes it's associated with something, maybe.
There are reasons for that.
Anhedonia.
Anhedonia.
A-N-T-I.
No, A-N, you would challenge my ability to spell these things. A-N-H-E-D. O-N.
Yeah, and as in
I feel like I'm in a spelling bee right now.
as in hedonism, as in what
Yeah.
self-pleasure,
Yeah, self-pleasure.
as in like anti-hedonism, but anhate.
If you Google it, it'll tell you how to spell it.
And, I don't want to go too much through the DSM because it turns into this WebMD show, and I try to stay away from that. And I think the whole point is, if I were to make one right now, from a clinical standpoint, it's better to avoid pathologizing things as much as possible.
It's a
And if
rabbit
you
hole.
give something a name and say, I'm going to run into WebMD and look for the answer, you'll get a medical answer for it, but it may not be a medical problem. And we're faced with that a lot, and grief is a special sort of thing. It is part of our design. We can have medical answers for it. They are very convenient answers. The solutions can be really convenient. They will be really nice when a doctor says, hey, all you got to do to feel better is this. And they hand you a white piece of paper. And, oh, thank you, I finally got that. But the truth is, sometimes it's much more complicated than that, much more painful than that, but it can result in something, in the long term, much more useful for you as a person.
I was surprised that physical pain isn't listed, because when I lost my husband, for months, I felt like half of my body was physically missing. I felt like I had been physically ripped apart.
And
it was just an ache and a pain that wouldn't go away, and it was physical.
where do you, without going, I don't want to turn this into a therapy session, but where do you think that came from?
Well, we were close. We'd been married almost 50 years. I just had never imagined life without him.
And
there was.
there are some situations, I'll take some other experiences that I've had where people will talk about those very things. It's very common. But your doctor might even say that's something, they'll use the word somatic. I don't know, some of you may have heard that before. But when you're not either addressing the pain or the experience emotionally in a direct way or completely, so you may not even notice it, but at the same time you could say, well, I know I'm sad, but your body's telling you you're not all the way sad, you're not sad enough, or you haven't dealt with all of the sadness. It will pop up in these odd physical senses. You go to the doctor, you get the answer. It could be, I would hope it's not going to be a pain pill, but at the same time, you know, you've probably heard of situations where people go into the doctor and they look for answers for months, years, decades even, and it's not always grief, it's not always something psychological, but there are some situations where that is absolutely the case, and things like that where it could be an unexpressed grief or an unexpressed pain or depression that's popping up, for lack of a better word, right now in another way.
Well, that was, you know, from the very beginning, and a feeling of drowning and not being able to get enough air and things like that. But that was for several months. And as I started to get, you know, a little past it, those things have gone away now. But there are still other areas of grief that still show up. But I'm just surprised that.
Well, the list isn't exhaustive. I mean, this is just these are just some examples.
People who have lost spouses and they felt that same thing at the beginning.
Yeah, like a psychosomatic. Somatic appeared, right, from the Greek word somos, which means body. So you feel it in your body.
I mean, I recognized
But-
my body wasn't missing.
That's right. But I mean, that's why exhaustion could be in that. But yeah, you could have, this list could be a lot more things. That's right. I've heard people who've lost children say it's like they don't have an arm anymore or something. They feel like part of them is, they have a, and of course, just to repeat, we're broadcasting here that our bodies, our body can respond to the grief. And we think it's just a medical problem, but really it's an emotional problem. Am I restating this correctly? So we pay attention to that. I want to move on. There's not any question or comments. We're going to run out of time pretty quickly. Anything else with that? So one more time, I will keep saying this, it's on purpose in ministry. Oh my goodness. None of these things are sinful or bad or evil. These are warning signs. I think of these things like in my vehicle. I have warning red lights that pop on, check the engine light, whatever. I don't look at that whenever that happens and go, oh, how dare you? It's a sinful truck. I pay attention. It means something's up. Now, maybe the sensor is wrong. Sometimes our sensor is wrong. But dadgummit, we better pay attention to it. So that's all this is. These are our sensors popping. And I'm saying if you find yourself ever, even one of these things, or 2 or 3 or 4 of these things are popping up, ding, 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 like the Apollo 13 mission. Ding, 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 ding. Houston, we have a problem. And they're all, something's going on. And, but some people are not good at that, and I will tell you why in a little bit. But good. So we grieve because it's God's gift to allow us to process and deal with it. And I love how one Christian counselor said it, we metabolize the pain, and I'll talk about that later. How do we do it? How do we grieve? There are many ways to talk about it. There is no one way. This is not one of those things you leave this study or in life and go, I feel bad. I don't do it just that same way he said. That's not how this works. You can read different books on this. Specialists have different ways. Most specialists that I know of, and Brock can correct me, in my studies as well, that they do talk about typically some kind of stages. They're identifiable, but that doesn't mean they don't ever overlap, because they can overlap. They can exist concurrently with each other. Sometimes they're just omitted, and I put that in your handout. But they're identifiable enough to go, I feel there's a different thing going on right now. It's related to this other thing right now that I do, but they're not exactly the same. Kind of like grief and forgiveness, as I put in the topic. Does that make sense? And the classic approach, it's not the only one. There's some therapists who go, oh, that doesn't work anymore. No, I should have made that voice. I shouldn't have said that. Some disagree with her. But the classic one is Kubler-Ross, of course, On Death and Dying. She studied, the book is not about grieving. She studied numerous people through years in her field of how people in the hospitals and so forth, how do they deal with death and dying? And that's why the book is called On Death and Dying. And she put together several patterns that she saw as people get close to death. And that's what she did. And she said these 5 major stages of denial, bargaining, anger, despair, and acceptance. And she argued, and most therapists argue, it's best to accept these stages, whatever your stages you articulate, versus fighting them off, ignoring them, and so forth. The best is say, these are normal, routine ways we go through that. Now, while I do think there are distinctions, and there are distinctions on how people process grief, I want to completely concur with what Brock said a moment ago is, the human condition is still quite similar. And that's why we can study these kind of things, and none of us go, I've never heard of that in my life. We all go, yep, I've done that, yeah, I've been depressed, I've been whatever. So while there are distinctions in how people grieve, there's also very common stages that people go through. Exactly how you articulate it, I don't really care. But I picked this classic one because it's classic, and you're going to be exposed to it online and in conversations. Also, I think it's helpful. And then later on, when we're finished with this section, Brock will also talk on some other stuff here, but that's what I'm doing. Now, any question or comments so far I want to talk about this? So we're going to start dissecting the grieving process. Okay, letter A, denial. It's more than a river in Egypt. Have you heard that before? Denial is, I think, absolutely universal response, especially when it's severe trauma. We can deny loss has occurred. And usually the very first response to trauma is no. No, nope, nope. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Now this is not exhaustive. I mean, look, there's books. I'm just giving you synopsis paragraphs. We can ignore the severity of the offense. We admit it happened, but it wasn't that bad. That's a form of denial. It's diminishing the pain, the offense, the vitiating it. She didn't mean it. It's not a big deal. I can find another husband. I have other stuff. Da-da-da-da-da. We can avoid the person or situation to pretend it never occurred. That's denial. One of the most heart-wrenching things I've ever heard, really, well, probably still is, but certainly at the time, years ago I heard on, I think it was a TV show of someone had broken in the house, and a woman called 911, and a guy came upstairs, and she was hiding, and she starts screaming, he's coming, coming, and he jumps on top of her and starts to try to rape her. And she's screaming on the phone, no, why? And then she's screaming no, and this primal rage of course, I don't deserve it. It's all the why question, and I was going to say more about that, but I didn't. A lot of us can get stuck in the why. That's a form of denial. Until I know why I did whatever, I'm not going to go through the grieving process. I've got to put my finger exactly on why. And I found in Christian circles, we love Christianese. Christianese is a particular language that Christians can speak. Not so much in this church, but in other places, where they can say things like, the first response to terrible loss is, everything happens for a reason. Anyway. I just did a podcast on that just the other day, so that's fresh on my mind. That thing that goes straight to, everything is a reason. That's to try to resolve the why question. It's kind of a form of denial, because if we go, oh, that's why it happened, now I'm better. And studies demonstrate people who think that if they'll figure out exactly why it happened, then they'll feel better. It's false. It's just false. And I meet that oftentimes with people, sometimes in genuine sadness and sometimes in genuine rage. Why did God let my son die? Why did blank happen? And they don't know right then. Some are very, very angry. Sometimes implicitly at me, and I'll talk about that later too. Other times they're just very sad. David, I don't understand why. And they're stuck in the why, they're stuck in denial stage. And they think that if I can just get the answer, it'll help me diminish the offense, or now that I understand it, it'll make all that pain go away, and it won't. And that's why in those moments, what I don't do is pull out my whiteboard and start bringing, well, there's different understandings of suffering in the world. Because what I tell them is, I can give you tons of reasons why. It's not going to make you feel better. They don't want to hear that at all. But I'm because I love you, I'm telling you the truth. But that response of, nope, no, is our way to process. Like, I don't want to go there. And that's normal. And that's exactly what I do when I'm in terrible sadness. It's what I would do if I went through if my children died, my wife died. The first thing I know I'd say is, nope, I don't understand what you just said. I don't understand, nope. Instead, what we need to do, instead of staying in a constant state of denial of the offense, we need to identify deliberately the loss we've experienced. And the healthy part of grieving is when you're able to name it and be specific. That's the best way to fight denial. I'll say this one thing, and I actually want to pause between each one of these, Brock, if that's okay. I'm not going to wait to the very bitter end, because I know you've got stuff to add. There are certain movies, I think, who bring out this aspect of grief very well. And it's very common in certain movies when someone's been through, it's usually a serious drama, they finally get the person to admit what happened. And I think a toot off the bat, you might not have seen. One was by Adam Sandler and Don Cheadle.
Rain Over Me, or Rain on Me.
Rain on Me.
I have that.
It's a movie where Adam Sandler's character's wife, and I think his family, I saw it years ago, died in 9/11, and he's going through depression and rage and anger. He's changed his personality, and Don, his friend, is trying to help him get out of it, and he can just blow up crazy and then go back to normal. And then it's a serious movie. At the very end, it's very moving because Adam Sandler finally, his friends tried everything. He's about to let him go, like, I can't do this anymore because he's gone crazy. And Adam Sandler's character finally, he breaks down and weeps, and finally he names exactly what happened. Like, his wife died, his kids, he lost them, and the sadness is so real. He finally gets past, and that's denial. And so he has symptoms of all this stuff going on. Another one that was very, very powerful, a thriller that came out a few years ago with Leonardo DiCaprio on it. And I can't tell you the movie, but there's a scene, there's a guy who plays...
Shutter Island?
Yeah, Shutter Island. He plays a police officer. Thank you.
Movie group.
That's right. Thank you. I didn't know that about you, Susan. I'm happy about that.
I go to a movie group at Burnett.
Oh, good. See, but man, I love
We
movies.
lost funding though.
In this movie, if you ever see it, there's a massive twist. But the point is, Leonardo DiCaprio's character plays a police officer who's going to look for this missing person at a psych ward up on like this island mountain. And it's kind of crazy. But come to find out, he's pretending to be the police officer. What's really happened is his wife killed all of his kids. And so he's in a constant, he got psychotic. He split toward now, and at the very end of the movie, and what they've done, the final of the movie is they've tried a few times, they finally get into this place where he finally admits what happened. And of course he's weeping and weeping, and he stops the fantasy. And in the movie, it's the second or third time to do it, and he breaks the fantasy, and it's this moving moment where he's weeping, and he gets past denial. And of course the next morning it starts all over again, so it didn't work. But this breakdown, this is powerful. Every time I see these kinds of things in movies or TVs, Groundhog Day. So those are powerful movies. Now those are extreme cases, but that happens often, and it can be in minor cases too of just denial. Let me pause there, and I'll hand this off. Go ahead, Pat. I'm so glad you asked that, because I do want to talk about that real quickly. Just repeat it. When your husband's dying of cancer and he finally dies, how is it afterward? You stay true to business, you get your business done,
I was able to take
but you were calm. Yeah. But after that, eventually when that emergency mode calmed down, then depression hit. Yeah, I do have thoughts. Brock, please, go ahead.
Well, your question was literally, how did that happen and why? So I'm
How
gonna,
did I function the way I functioned, and then afterwards,
that's, first of all, an amazing story, but more than that, just to get right to the question, is that I just want to talk about the fact that we're designed, I believe that we're designed in a very, very specific way, and that's why these sorts of things we experience them commonly sort of the same way, but thinking about the function of how you were able to go through all of those tasks.
it was cool.
You weren't, your whole life must have fallen apart at that moment.
Well, that was my second husband, we were only together 11 years.
A large portion of your life must have fallen apart at that point.
It just,
Okay, but instead of being devastated, you were able to get some things done.
because I
And,
didn't want the hospice nurse or anybody else doing it.
You know,
I wanted to do it.
and other models I've looked at, instead of just calling it denial, talk about that kind of experience as numbness. I don't think it really matters what we call it. It's that you're able, instead of being so immediately aware of the gravity or the magnitude of the loss, you're able to, your body just checks out and kind of puts things aside, and your mind, you haven't perceived the loss yet. You haven't even started the task, and so to something up there goes pause on the emotional part, maybe even pause on the thinking part.
Because I knew he was dead, I knew he was
Yeah.
coming back.
I've had clients describe it as I was on autopilot, and then you can say for blank number of weeks, for blank number of hours, for blank number of years even. But, and I think the functional part is where I like to talk about design, because I couldn't explain how it happened or what mechanism in our brain goes on. We know from psychology, we read about things like psychosis and dissociation and derealization, depersonalization. Those are, again, simple words. I don't like to use those, but it's a beautiful function in a way to be able to say that you got some stuff done in spite of all of that.
I've never told this to a group before, I've only told 1 or 2 other people this story before.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
I don't know how I did it.
You did. And I would say,
I knew it would take the hospice nurse at least 45 minutes to get there, because she was 87 years old, and she was a Catholic, elderly nun coming from Leavenworth to the boonies in McLeod.
and I don't want to go too far into that. There could probably be a whole class on just that one little mechanism in our minds, and but I do want to point out that has to be God's influence in our design, absolutely so. And I think that's having that pause button or that switch, or that, maybe it's a circuit breaker, maybe we'll use that analogy, but allows us, and has through eons, probably to get away from threats, to continue living and doing the functional tasks while bad things were happening to us. Just to emphasize, that's one portion of a sequence of events that, if it's to be resolved eventually, will, or if it's to go through the whole process, it will progress through the sequence. So there's that denial, numbness, I got through it, whatever you want to call it, and then other things should happen. I use the word should, I guess, because I don't have another one right now. But,
Is it an aspect of just adrenaline?
it could be. I know that people have described a sort of a state of energy or increased energy, kind of I've heard the word, one lady told me her mind was on fire, but she wasn't sure where the flame was or something like that. I can't remember the exact word she used, but it's like she was kind of stepping on hot coals going through the day, but she got through the day somehow.
So wherever it came from, you certainly have the capacity. Not everyone does that. Sometimes we do it because we're in shock. That's a form of denial. When that trauma, a train wreck, all of a sudden we just kind of do the autopilot. Sometimes we do that, by the way, because it's learned. It's a learned defense mechanism. When you've been through trauma, like I was as a child, you learn how to be real calm when all hell is breaking loose. Because as a kid, if you don't do that, there's no one to help what we call containment. No one can contain your feelings for you. And so for a second, you detach from the situation, get your job done until mama, daddy, whatever, the drunk, the this, the alcohol, whatever the issue's going on. Mine wasn't alcoholism, it was some. When that's finally calmed down, then you go back and you can ideally. So sometimes it's learned, sometimes it's not learned. Sometimes people have that presence, it's all a form of numbness, denial, whatever, that helps us detach from the pain. And I just want to emphasize before I move on and ask you, and I'll, Chap, these things are, I'm trying to, if I'm repeating myself, I apologize, this is on purpose, so I'm trying to make sure I'm nuancing correctly. These are normal, appropriate responses. What's not appropriate, as I try to say in the little paragraphs, is oftentimes when this becomes an attitude or disposition. Like, I'm choosing not to talk about the severity of the offense. I'm choosing not to talk about the event that occurred. Does that make, that's when it's not healthy. You're gonna get stuck. But a normal, rational, momentary time of no is normal. It's gonna let your brain finally start getting used to reality. Does that make sense? So it's not the feeling of denial, all of a sudden you've done something bad. It's to make sure you don't want to get stuck there. And to help us not get stuck there is you start, whenever you can, the next days, weeks, months, days or weeks, hopefully, you start putting your finger on what you lost or disappointed. Yes, ma'am. Very good point. So the vocabulary words are used, words are powerful and can demonstrate we're in denial. Did you read Elaine's blog? She just talked about how to talk to a child about grief. Because we talk oftentimes about not using the words passed away. We use the word death or dying. My daughter's hamster just died like 2 days ago. So we don't say, he passed away to be with hamster angels and he became an angel to look over you. And he's always, I don't say that about hamsters or people. And so that's right. So we can use vocabulary that denies what really happened or the severity of the offense by trying to water it down or making up bad ideas, bad theology to try to assuage the pain. But that's done. I completely agree with that. So death and dying, I use that all the time in funerals, talks, to help at least one person hear, let them hear the word that so-and-so died. And though that's sad, it helps, again, bring, I think you said the word, I don't even say closure, but there's something that is, it happened, it's real. And that's real. Thank you. Anything else you want to say about that? I'm repeating it so they can hear on the Facebook. I appreciate it. So yeah, although vocabulary we can use, sometimes we can hear the people saying, and sometimes we can pick up on those denial or numbness or absent-mindedness kind of thing. Help them name it. Maybe not at Kroger and y'all have Dillon's or whatever. Tell me about all the loss you experienced. But in your own life, when you journal and so forth, naming what it is, or having a good trusted friend, saying the words, I'm sad about blank. This happened to me. That stuff. Let me go through a couple of these before we finish up if we can. Bargaining, again, not all of these are stages everyone goes through all the time, but this is a common one. We can try to make a deal with God or others to fix the problem or address the loss. I'll go to church the rest of my life if you'll just blank. I swear God, I'll worship forever for so-and-so doesn't die of cancer. And they'll just, whatever it takes. We can promise to do anything or do whatever to avoid the loss. See, you hear this with children all the time. I'll be your best friend forever if I just got a piece of chocolate. All right, I'll do whatever it takes. Don't make me get grounded. Yes, ma'am? We can take impetuous risk to gamble for something that acts as quick replacement for a loss. It's kind of like a form of bargaining. Like as soon as someone dies, you run off and go marry someone else, or date someone else, or sleep with someone else, or go buy something else. They're very, very sad about my dog dying and run off and go buy another dog immediately. It's kind of like a way of swapping out real fast. It's this swapping out is the bargaining part. So again, it's another kind of form of denial, but it's a bargaining so I don't have to experience the loss. These are things that trip you up. So it's normal to do it, but we don't want to get stuck there. Instead, the top page 2, instead we need not to make any significant decisions while grieving. I almost put the significant quotations, but hopefully you know what that means. Leaning upon trusted friends and family is crucial in our attempt to stay rational. If you have friends and family, that's right. If there's anybody at all. But when you don't want to make those decisions, is if you can't help it. So when you feel ever in grieving process, you feel an urge to bargain. Like, well, I'll just, especially with things, to gamble your life away. I've known families, and I don't blame them as they've done something wrong, but I've known families who all of a sudden moved to a different country to do this one special treatment that one doctor said might work. It's a full-on gamble. I mean, they'll give up everything. They'll take a loan of $100,000 to go down to Mexico or whatever it is. I'm not saying they were wrong to do it, but that's the kind of thing that is, I cannot adapt the fact that it's going to happen. In other words, it's not because it's some tried and true long procedure that's been tested. It's this may or may not work in the Alps or something. It's that kind of sense of bargaining, and that would be a significant decision, and I would discourage people from making in the midst of that grief.
I was going to say, while you're emotional in any capacity, you
Yeah.
shouldn't.
That's right, that's right, emotional incapacity. I'll say this quick thing, and then any question or comments. One thing that happens, and I was going to say this at some point, I'll say it now to finish up. One thing that happens for a fact is our brain chemistry changes when we go through disappointment, particularly serious disappointment and sadness. And I remember, I'll never forget it, when I first learned this in a master's, the guy drew a chart, and he said, so if we assume for a second, this is our, not really ego states, but let's say brain states, kind of like that. And let's say the emo is emotional, not that other emo, if you know what that is, and you're young enough to understand. If you're old, don't worry. And then emotional, so let's, in general, the normal person stays in what we call the adult ego state, where you're primarily irrational most of the time. You're making decisions all day long, how to drive, pick up gas, eat food, what just normal, I need to take a shower or whatever. And the emotional state is generally pretty small for most people. When you go through a traumatic event, it inverts immediately. Your emotional state skyrockets, your rational shuts down. The blood flow to the cerebral cortex, the prefrontal cortex, actually diminishes. And so when that symptoms when you said, I don't remember things, I can't concentrate, I can't think straight, that's rational. That plummets. And so your emotive state, your emotional state is so hypervigilant, so, that's right, hypersensitive to everything. It's one of the main reasons why you do not want to make significant decisions while you're in a highly sad state, because you are not thinking clearly. And that's why I said here, you need to lean upon anybody you can find who's trusted at all to say, does this make sense? Is it good to sell my house tomorrow? Should I go buy 13 pairs of shoes? Should I go sleep around at the bar immediately because he cheated on me? Should I go? You run these things past people and trust them. They go, would you have done that last Friday? Is that normal for you? And if they say, well, yeah, I'm an addict. Okay, that's a different, yeah, you need a therapist. But in general, does that make sense? Because in highly emotional states, you'll do stuff in the moment because you grieve that you don't want to do. So bargaining, staying a constant state of bargaining is not a good thing. I'm going to stop there. Any questions or comments the last few minutes we have? Let me say a prayer for us. Can I do that? We thank you, Heavenly Father, so much. The fact that we can talk about these things means you have developed a mechanism to allow us to live in the real world, to experience joy and fun times and happy things, and to experience loss. And Lord Jesus, we need your help to learn from you and your model that that's okay. Help us fight the temptation that when we've been hurt, not to open up again and to put up our guards and be defensive and not get close. Help us not do that. Help us not be in denial or the numbness, or rather make up a mindset that that's okay. Help us not make any kind of decisions when we go through the terrible trauma. Help us be safe friends and family and colleagues with others who experience their grief. And as we'll talk about later, but Lord Jesus, in spirit, give us the wisdom to be a safe place to allow people full freedom to feel what they feel. And of course, Spirit, help us feel the freedom to feel what we feel. Please search our hearts and minds. All of us at some level have been wounded. All of us at some level are still either coming from a stage of grief or going to head to it soon enough. So please help this really sink into us. Help us be freed from bad ideas, false beliefs, and set free to believe true things that you would tell us. Please give us the courage to face those things and identify those things that have caused us terrible sadness or grief or anger and so forth. Help us love you. Help us receive your love. And this week in all of our conversations, every one of them, and every interaction we have with a human being, help us love our neighbor as ourselves and love our enemy as ourselves. For those this tonight who are grieving terribly still, please heal them. Please give them hope. Please remind them they're not alone, and that you can bring us through any process of healing ever if we'll just bring it to you. Thank you, Lord Jesus. Thank you. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I really do hope that you enjoyed it. I hope you'll listen more. If you want more, go to davidpendergrass.com. There are tabs at the top that let you have access to all the podcasts I've recorded, to sermons I've done, books I've written. They're all there at davidpendergrass.com. You can also check me out on Facebook, facebook.com/Glimpse of the Kingdom. Facebook.com/Glimpse of the Kingdom. And also look at my Twitter feed at Glimpse the Kingdom or at Dr. D. Pendergrass, at Dr. D. Pendergrass. There's tons of ways to reach out. I hope you will. Send me your questions, send me your comments. If you'd like to support the ministries of Glimpse of the Kingdom, you can also find ways to give online on davidpendergrass.com. If you'd like for me to come and do some consulting, check out my website, davidpendergrassconsulting.com, and I'll be happy to come out and speak to your organization and help and train any way I can. God bless you. See you online.